Hello, and welcome to Indiana Issues, coming to you live from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim, the editor and publisher of IndyPolitics.org. Well, we had an election this past week. What is there to talk about? Actually, quite a bit. And joining us in studio here in downtown Indianapolis are our guest Libertarian and former Secretary of State candidate Mark Rutherford. Mark, thank you for being with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Mike Leppert, Democrat and also writer and political blogger. Michael, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
And fresh off a re-election victory, Republican State Senator Jim Merritt. Jim, congratulations on your victory, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen, what did we all learn from this past week? Mark, we'll start with you.
Oh my gosh, what I learned and what we didn't expect was what libertarians are calling the red tide. The straight ticket voting for Republicans was huge, and that's why I think Braun won. And we didn't expect it. We thought it was a very close race, and that was the thing that I noted the most. I also thought that was really unexpected was Hamilton County's Democrat numbers and Madison County's Republican numbers. We're seeing some residential population shifts here, I think.
Michael?
I agree with the population shifts. The Republic has been saved again. The election had a lot of positives for a lot of different people. It was good to see all of the things that happened nationally. It was good to see some campaigns that were surprisingly successful. So I feel good about what happened, and there's a lot to talk about, a lot to learn, especially on demographics.
Jim?
There are lots to digest. As you both know, on those 2 weekends in Marion County with the early voting, just being there all day long, it was just incredible, the stream of people that voted, and the absentees in Marion County, which are kind of considered early voters as well. And putting my county chairman hat on, 2019 is going to be a very interesting year. And putting my state senate hat on, I went door to door from December 5th all the way to Monday night. And in my first door I went to was a lady who said, "How do you feel about Trump?" And from the tone, you tend to think, well, how can I? This is my president, but I'm going to have a primary challenge in a general election. How am I going to handle this? And I said, I respect the president. I respect President Obama, and this is what I've done in the last 28 years, and this is what you can expect from me in the next 4. And I did that for 11 months. And so it was quite a long campaign, but there's a lot to digest. There's a lot to learn, and I think, Mark, you're spot on. There's a residency. There's a shift in central Indiana that we all have to be very aware of.
Well, let's start with the first race. Obviously, U.S. Senator-elect Mike Braun, the winner in the U.S. Senate race. Let's throw some numbers up if we could. I thought this was interesting because, like I said, Mark, with the number of straight ticket voting, Mike Braun beat Joe Donnelly 51.6% to 44.4%. Also, Lucy Brenton, the Libertarian, coming in at about just under 4% at 3.9%. Now, interesting is I want to just point this. Our poll was basically right. The one we did with Mason Strategies and Indy Politics, because we had said, although in the initial sample, Mike Braun had to lead by 4, the margin of error was also about plus or minus 4%. So you're taking the margin of error, factor that in with the undecideds. I look like a genius. Yay.
Especially when you're looking in the mirror, right?
Of course. hey, everybody looks good, at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
You may regret it the next day. Mm-hmm. But let me start with you, Jim. Why do you think Mike Braun won?
Well, I think Mike Braun ran a good campaign, but I also you just showed the numbers. I think it's still a red state, and there's straight ticket. We believe that. I believe if Dick Lugar would have been in the campaign against Donnelly, he would have won. And from the 2016 campaign, it's obviously a red state, and we repeated that again in 2018.
Is this, Mike Leppert, just a classic example of this is just Mike Braun is your quote-unquote generic Republican and Joe Donnelly is almost sort of your generic Democrat, and this is just the breakdown here in Indiana, or is there something else going on?
I think the answer to your first question is probably yes. I'm not gonna beat that drum because I think there are opportunities on individual campaigns and a way to be convincing. and motivating to voters to turn out. It's a strange phenomenon because turnout was so much higher everywhere, all across the country. However, in the strongest places of Indiana, as you noted earlier in your newsletter, that Marion County underperformed by comparison to other counties. And so people who were more inclined to come out and vote Democrat did not perform as well as some of the more Republican strongholds of the state. And I think that is indicative of a lot of things. So, one of those things is that there aren't any other competitive races going on in Indianapolis. And so there's less of a reason to show up. But it's bigger than that. And so that performance is a real problem. But fundamentally, the problem that I have and differences with the campaign is that Joe Donnelly ran a very centrist type campaign, and we can debate individual aspects of that all we want. But when he speaks, or when the campaign spoke about not being all that enamored with the far left, that may have alienated some of them. And I've yet to hear a Republican in Indiana not be enamored with the far right. And so they are inclusive of everyone that is right of middle. And they don't carve any of that off. And there was a little bit of that going on in this campaign on the Democrat side, I believe.
Your thoughts, Mark Rutherford?
Yeah, it was a very interesting. The Libertarian numbers were about spot on with what we predicted early on. The problem is we knew it was going to be more voters. We didn't know how many more. And it was just amazing to see how many people came out and voted this year. It's for a midterm election. It was just amazing. And so from looking at the race, I mean, we had Lucy Brenton did a good job on the debates, but I'm with you, Mike, on Donnelly. Part of us think within the Libertarian Party he made a mistake by kind of ignoring the far left. I would say that the Republicans did a better job trying to be a big tent of everybody, and so they probably didn't have anybody to worry about losing them. I was up in Elkhart on the Saturday before the election, and it was an event that was mostly older Republicans there. The younger people there were kind of Libertarian, so that's why I was there and talking to them. But boy, there were a ton of them, and I'm going, well, shoot. The Republican Party is getting a lot of their base is really excited about Braun, and that's why they were there. They're very excited about it. So I got an inkling that he was doing better than I had thought previous to that.
But to push back on that a little bit, you have Evan Bayh, you have Joe Hogsett, you have Frank O'Bannon, Joe Kernan. What do they all have in common? They're very conservative Democrats. So is Donnelly. And so I don't know. I don't remember them ignoring or supporting the left. But Donnelly was pretty much doing what other campaigns had done in the past.
Oh, I think the left came out and supported Frank O'Bannon and Joe Kernan.
Okay.
I do, and I think that they embraced them. I think that the model
you know better than I would.
The model that you speak of, though, is one that has worked, and I think that it has matured. I think that its time is behind us.
It was just one of the situations, gentlemen, because I went back and looked at some of the data. That's the joy of being sleep deprived. You have lots of time to look through lots of numbers. And some of the major places where you need Democratic turnout, in Marion County, Jimmy brought this up, in Marion County, Lake County, and actually St. Joe, Democratic turnout was higher than usual midterms, but it was only about 45, 46%. Whereas in your major Republican areas, it's 58, 60%. It was just one of those things that, we talk about blue waves and red walls, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to Republicans showed up, and Democrats just didn't show up with the same intensity. And had they did, we'd be probably having a different conversation today.
Well, that's true.
Yes.
And I may be sitting here as a former state senator, and Marion County is becoming more of a Democrat stronghold. I'm not sure in a municipal election that's true, but I saw a lot of people that I knew that were Democrats sort of flowing through Lawrence Township's administration building.
Right. Well, I walked to my polling place, and I've come from small towns in Indiana, and it is especially with the additional sites this year in Indianapolis, it is getting easier and easier to vote in this city, and people are just going to have to do it. There's not the barriers that I wrote about this week in Georgia and Florida going on here. And a lot of good things have happened in Marion County, and there were a lot of positive signs early on. But those numbers are they're just not good enough, and that turnout number I think is manageable, and it needs a shot of adrenaline.
You're watching Indiana Issues coming to you live from Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. I'm your host, Abdul-Hakim. Our guests today are Libertarian Mark Rutherford, Democrat Michael Leppert, and Republican Jim Merritt. Purple wave, gentlemen. The sort of take these up to the national level. Once again, blue waves and red walls. Like, you know what? If I may steal a line from Prince here, it seems more like a purple wave. You got Republicans, expand their control of the Senate. Democrats take over the House. Quick show of the numbers, if we have them real quickly here. Before, Republicans had a 235 majority in the House. That number down to 197. Democrats taking over at least now 223. We still have some races still out there. And over on the Senate side, Republicans start out with 51, and because we still have some races out there undetermined yet, still with a clear majority, Democrats losing at least 3, 2 sort of in the other category. Is America, gentlemen, politically schizophrenic?
Well, Abdul, I think one factor in those numbers that we have to kind of take a look at is all the retirements in the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives out in Washington. What happens if, 40 people that decide that they're going to stay? And these are popular red district or purple district, if you would say. What would happen then? Of course, it didn't happen. We'll never know. So it's kind of it's very difficult to actually look at the political landscape and know exactly what's happening. And somebody said on TV the other night, I tend to agree with it, that those individuals who that are Democrats that were elected in red districts or purple districts, what happens when they have to vote for Nancy Pelosi? The first vote, and what is their district gonna, gonna do some backflips and anger? I don't know, but it's gonna be really a fascinating time.
Well, I think that we're seeing, and Mark pointed it out earlier in his comments, a lot of this has to do with the changing battlegrounds, and those battlegrounds are they're obviously states, and when you look at the numbers in the Senate, those won't fluctuate, and so that is a classic rural versus urban sort of thing that isn't going to change over time. But what is changing over time is suburbia, and suburban voters are coming to the Democrat Party like they never have before. Those demographics are changing. The Democrats have to embrace that and nurture that over time, because those are people that are listening to other messages that they haven't listened to in the past, and that's why I think there are a lot of districts in the House nationally that are more competitive than they have been, and so we'll see if this opportunity, which is what it is for Democrats, will be seized, or if things like what he's talking about. I think that I think that the Nancy Pelosi vote won't be harmful, but I know that there are others who do.
Mark, is a situation where those suburban voters are gravitating toward Democrats, or they're just leaving Republicans as Republicans become a little bit more sort of hardcore, ideology-wise?
From walking districts and from what we've done, it seems like that the suburban women are looking at the Democratic Party way more than they used to, and that's the trend that we're seeing. But looking at what happened for a midterm election, the president's party tends to lose a little bit for lots of reasons, and I don't see anything this doesn't mean anything until I see what 2020 does, and that will tell me if these trends are just a one-off or if it's something that's it's really happening. What we did notice is that rural areas, the people in the rural areas are getting more and more Republican. More people that would have been called a conservative Democrat or even a leftist, they're becoming more and more enamored with the Republican Party. The urban areas still very Democrat and keeping Democrat. The suburban area women are the ones that we're looking at, and we're seeing that they're not sure where they want to be. And that's the big change.
You mentioned 2020. Something I thought was interesting. In Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, states that Donald Trump won in 2016 all elected Democratic governors. And so it brings up an interesting question. What does that mean? Are these like sort of now the new battleground places? Because you would assume that if the people are going to go for a Democratic governor, they're probably at least at this point maybe leaning towards a Democrat for president.
Well, 2 out of 3 of those states had interior, and the midterms are usually a local situation. In Wisconsin, it's clear that the Republican governor just might have worn out his welcome, and the unions have been slapped around by him 4 or 5 elections now, and you didn't have Ryan on the ballot, and there wasn't a whole lot of activity there. In Pennsylvania, that was a re-election, and so people felt comfortable with with him. Michigan, I'm not sure about, but it's in, but
Marijuana on the ballot. That's
yeah,
what got
but Ohio
Here's a hint for you guys in Indiana. I'm just telling you, Jim.
Ohio elects a Republican governor, and so it's just really interesting that there we could talk for hours. The additional Democrat congressional districts in Pennsylvania because of the redistricting. How did that play a role? I mean, it's just the dominoes would have fallen, and this is what we have.
Yeah, there's a definite shift going on, and it's not. I don't think that the battle lines are getting blurry between rural and urban, but that blurry is in suburban, that's for sure. But when you have the Kansas governor, that was a little bit of a surprise. In New Mexico, the new governor in Colorado, Nevada. I mean, there are a lot of things happening that look unfamiliar because they're new. And the most important thing about those 7 governors, and I predicted that number, is that they're going to be sitting in the governor's office when we're redoing maps. And so the 34 to 16 split in the governor's office is being driven down to 27-23 is a big deal, and so those things actually matter, in the future going forward, and we'll see that in 2020 along with the constitutional amendment in Florida.
Mark.
No, it's just a very interesting scenario here, and I'm almost reluctant to say what it means because I just think we need to have a lot more time to evaluate it. It's just fascinating.
Well, I think one of the roles, Abdul, that we've got to figure out is polling. I just don't think it's exact science anymore. And Arizona having a female, possibly Democrat U.S. Senator. Now, could Barry Goldwater predicted that?
Well, actually, it's Libertarian Barry Goldwater probably could have.
Yes, he probably could have. Yes, he could have. Yes, definitely. Yes.
You're watching Indiana Issues, our roundtable discussion about the past election. I'm with you from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. Libertarian Mark Rutherford, Democrat Michael Leppert, Republican Jim Merritt. Gentlemen, let's refocus our attention here to Indiana. While no party changes at the congressional level, there were some flips at the State House. Mike Delph, one of your former colleagues, losing to J.D. Ford in the state Senate. We had a few, I think Democrats maybe gained like 3 seats overall in northern Indiana. We still, as we tape this program, got some stuff that's still out there that nobody quite figure out. Maybe the FBI will when they're done. Brian Bosma, reelected speaker, but interesting, whereas the speaker did very well in Hancock and Hamilton counties, 50-50 here in Marion County. Once again, Jim, what you talked about, that Marion County, these changing trends and demographics.
And I have not looked at the numbers, but it's a pretty good guess. I lost Marion County to my opponent, and my opponent was never on TV. And
you won by about 2,500 votes and some change.
Okay,
I did the math.
In Marion County.
No, just totally.
Right.
Yeah.
That mean I think Hamilton County, I won by a large motion. But it goes back to the suburban. The Democrat Party has a real opportunity in suburban Indiana, suburban Philadelphia, suburban Cincinnati, and it's a trend. And I can tell you, in the spring, I concentrated on Fishers in all my walking and my talking and my calls and everything else. And this time, I concentrated on Lawrence Township because I knew I needed a vote there, a big vote. And I think you all three know I worked really hard because I thought I was behind, and so it's a changing dynamic. Senator Delph, has been depicted as an enigma, and that didn't go well with the City Chamber of Commerce. It didn't go well with Zionsville and Carmel, and Pike Township is a very difficult place for Republicans these days. And when I started out way a long time ago, it was so red. It was so red.
The Democrats that span the northern part of Indianapolis from Zionsville and all of Boone County all the way across over into your district in the northeast side of town did a fantastic job of recruiting candidates, of injecting some energy into the possibility of what it could mean to have candidates in a time. And that all started before the national media was saying that suburbia is becoming the battleground. These guys put their heart and soul into all the things that it takes to be competitive in elections. and on top of that, suburbia is starting to change. And so J.D. Ford ran 2 good campaigns, and he ran well 4 years ago and didn't get it done, and he ran well this time, and things have
in
changed.
the Delph race.
In the Delph race. And you had a good candidate running against you. Derek Camp is a leader in the Young Democrat group, and he's going to be around for a while. And Poonam Gill also ran a good campaign against Speaker Bosma. So there were a lot of things working to drive those numbers into an encouraging spot for Democrats across the party and the individuals, I think, that were running those races.
Let me ask you this, Mark.
Yes.
Was this just a situation where we just had the perfect storm? We had more early places to early vote and satellite voting, particularly here in Indianapolis and Marion County. But you also you had a very contested U.S. Senate race, and say what you will about Donald Trump, he did more to bring people to the polls than just about any MTV Rock the Vote.
Finally, a good legacy item.
We got more people to participate.
Yeah, I think it was a perfect storm, but there are trends out there that we think are happening, so we're looking at them, and that's why I say 2020 is going to be a very interesting election to see if those trends were just a part of a perfect storm of everything coming together, or if it really shows that there's a shift going on. I suspect there's a shift going on politically about who people identify with what party, et cetera, but you don't know until 2020. I compared all the Secretary of State races. As you know, the Libertarian parties are very interested in the Secretary of State's race because it's our ballot access race. And this one just was one of the most perfect storm, bizarre ones that we've ever had for lots of reasons. Not complaining about it. The voters do what they do. But what lessons do we have from this? We're still trying to figure out. What I do know is that I think Senator Braun and the Republicans were extremely organized and got their base out. And I think in many areas, Marion County, southern Hamilton County, the Democrats got way better organized than they've been and got their people out. Marion County was a little bit of a disappointment, I think, in the numbers, but my gosh, I've been around Hamilton County since I was 12 years old, and the Democrats have never been that organized, and it was kind of impressive. They actually came to my house and knocked on the door. I mean, wow.
Is this one of the things, Mike, as a Democrat, that, like I said, just comparing the turnout in Republican places versus Democrat places, the Democrats were so focused on those suburban voters that you almost sort of forgot to protect your flank and make sure you get out your own people, because as we said earlier in this program, had Democrat turnout in Democratic counties been equal to Republicans, we're all in a different universe today.
Well, it's an ongoing problem. It's an ongoing complaint that I've had, and since I'm not a guy that's organizing the campaigns, it's easy for me to do. But the fact of the matter is that when you have Marion County, for example, this year, what were the competitive races there? And there weren't really any until you got to the edges where you got up into here. You're a good example, Senator. But there weren't the legislative races from the heart of the city are 80% districts. Congressman Carson, very heavily packed district as a result of the maps. And so besides the Senate race, there's less reason to get out, and that is a problem that we need to accept and overcome if the party's going to do well in those areas. And it's the same sort of thing that you see in the other Democrat areas. They have not performed well. That is a contributing factor, but that is a challenge that needs to be up at the top of the priority list if we're going to perform well on a statewide basis in the future.
Something else, Jim, I want to make sure we get to as we get ready to wind down the program. We had school referenda on the ballot. Lots of schools doing well, but also not so well when it came to approval. I want to say 3 school corporation measures failed. IPS, their referendum passed. So a big shout out to our mutual friend Robert Vane for being part of that organization. What does that tell you about these referendums? And Jim, as a lawmaker, are you guys going to have to go back to the drawing board, maybe rework the school funding formula so the property taxpayers have less of a burden and the state picks up a bigger share?
Well, we'll continue, and we all know this, every 2 years we tweak and we try to make it as fair as possible. And but the whole idea behind the tax caps was to encourage referendums. So I think we'll look at school safety, just so many different issues that just pop up. Right now it's school buses. And so all this costs money. And so it's it'll be for the rest of my political career in the Senate, we will be constantly looking and tweaking the school funding formula.
You see that happening?
I think that him saying that this was supposed to drive referenda, I agree with that. That some are failing and others are passing, that people are putting the thought into those things is something that is encouraging to me. There were plenty of legislators that I've met over the years who just fundamentally didn't like putting issues like that on the ballot, but things are that the tweaking that goes on tweaks their attitudes about that. What I'm impressed by was that people were willing to go out and vote to spend more of their own money to do something that we all, I think most of us agree, needed to be done. And that's not always the easiest thing to do for a voter. So I'm happy that they did what they did. I think that's probably going to be the trend for some time, though.
Mark, is a referendum about money or is it about relationships? Because one thing I've always noticed in Indiana, since we kind of went the referendum route, is usually the places that the referendum fail, it's like the first time the school board actually realized that, hey, we have voters out there. Maybe we need to go talk to them and ask for money, whereas the referendums that tend to pass the first time, people have been engaged in that dialogue, almost like your kids at college. If you call me, don't just call me when you want money. Actually call to say how's mom and grandma doing?
Right. I find the referendum great for the school systems because one of my complaints before this happened was that the superintendent and the school board just kind of put it through whatever they wanted to do, in my opinion, and the voters didn't know what was happening. Now they have to justify it, and they have to get out there and give their reasons. And if the voters' results tell you anything, they're getting good reasons out there, and the voters are saying, sure, increase my taxes. But I think that's a good thing. But in my cynical world, the fact that we had 3 that failed is better than what I thought happened in the past, where all of that would happen. And at least the voters got to understand it, and some of them said, not good enough, or you're not telling me enough. Sometimes I think the referendum are about the superintendent and the school board not communicating well. So it's a relationship from that standpoint.
Well, gentlemen, we've got just a couple moments left here. I want to go around the table as we do our political predictions and prognostications. Sort of what do we all learn from this experience? Mark, we'll start with you and just work our way around the table.
Oh, I mean, I don't know if I learned anything from the experience that I didn't already know, and that is you don't know what the election is going to be until Tuesday night at about 10 o'clock at night. But you learn so many lessons, and it's great to do that. What I found very interesting was, though, that the Democrats do have a problem, and that is I was in Lake County most of Election Day, and there wasn't any excitement. And part of it was because there wasn't a lot of candidates in competitive races. And so everybody knew what the results were going to be. The Democrat was going to win because everybody liked the Democrat. So there weren't lines there. I was at one of the largest polling places for 2 or 3 hours, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is bad for Donnelly. This is bad for Mr. Harper. It's they're not getting the vote totals they need to overcome the rest of the state.
Mike?
As we talked about last week, I'm very happy with the turnout, the access issues that have improved, especially in Indianapolis, and the overall numbers are great as far as turnout is concerned. Nothing is bigger though than the constitutional amendment that passed in Florida. There are 1.5 million more eligible voters as a result of the felony ban that they have down there, and that is going to change the state of Florida. And so I'm watching that very closely, and we don't have that sort of a problem here, thank goodness. But it's going to be interesting to watch how an electorate changes when you have 1.5 million additional voters eligible to vote in 2020. 2020 is going to be probably more interesting than this one was.
Jim?
I think 2 things. One, through those 11 months of going door to door and talking on the phone with people, there are more people that actually have 2 jobs than ever before in my experience, and that's a message to us. And we've got to continue to work. The economy could be booming, but we've got to continue to work on retraining and making people aware of new jobs and filling those new jobs. The second thing, prediction, I think Michael Bloomberg will play a role in 19 and 20. And he just put his pinky in the water a little bit with a lot of money, but he's going to be on the national scene a lot. Not that I'm real happy about that, but it's just a prediction that's going to happen.
Like I said, my thing is you got to give Donald Trump credit. He did more to drive voter turnout in the midterm election than any rock the vote in what I call the do-gooders campaign ever could. Gentlemen, that's going to wrap up this program today. Our guests have been Libertarian Mark Rutherford, Democrat Michael Leppert, and Republican Jim Merritt. I'm Abdul-Hakim Shabazz from the Edge Media Studios in downtown Indianapolis. You've been watching Indiana Issues. Thank you very much for being with us, and we'll see you next time on Indiana Issues. All right, 29-24.
Well, thank you, Abdul, for letting me pontificate.
Yeah.